All right, buckle up because today we're diving headfirst into the story of Henry Ford. And let me tell you, this isn't your average history lesson.
Not at all.
We're going way deeper than the Model T, digging into the man himself. So we're covering new ground here.
Absolutely.
I think folks are going to be surprised by some of the things we've uncovered.
Oh, I think so. I mean, to really get Henry Ford, you have to go back to the very beginning, long before the Model T was even a thought in his head.
Picture this. It's 1879. 16-year-old Henry Ford decides, you know what, I've had enough of this farm life, packs his bags, and sets his sights on Detroit.
And keep in mind, this is a time when cars were basically just a novelty. I mean, they were a luxury that most people could only dream of.
But not Henry, no. He's got a different vision brewing.
Oh, absolutely, he did. And, to really understand Ford, you have to understand the time he was living in. The late 19th century, it was an era of incredible change. Technology is advancing like never before. Cities like Detroit are exploding in size. And there's this sense that the old ways, they're giving way to something brand new.
And he just felt it.
And Ford, even as a teenager, he seemed to sense this shift, He knew something big was on the horizon.
And he was not about to be left behind on that farm. He was not your typical farm boy, was he?
No, not at all. I mean, there's this one quote from Ford that I always found so telling. He said,
Yeah.
and I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially said, I never really had much love for the farm itself. It was the mother on the farm I loved.
Wow.
Imagine feeling that way at that age.
Yeah.
I mean, it speaks volumes about his desire for something more, something different.
Yeah.
And you can almost see a direct line from his, I guess you could say, frustration with the slow, backbreaking work on the farm to this obsession he develops later on with efficiency and streamlining the manufacturing process.
Absolutely.
He wasn't just building cars, he was waging a war on inefficiency itself.
Yeah, and it's almost like he was hardwired for this battle from day one. There's that famous story, and I'm sure some of our listeners have heard it, about Ford as a young boy, maybe 12 years old, gets a pocket watch as a gift. Now, most kids, they'd be thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not Henry. He gets this pocket watch, and what does he do? Takes the thing apart.
You got to know how it works. Right?
Just to see how it ticks.
Classic Henry Ford.
And he doesn't just take it apart, he puts it back together. Becomes like the local watch repair expert.
Which, it
Yeah.
seems like a small thing, right?
Right.
But it really speaks to his character. This incredible curiosity, this need to figure out how things work. And even then, you can see the drive to make them better.
Yeah.
It's like the preview of what's to come.
So you've got this restless kid, a natural-born mechanics, stuck in a world that wasn't quite ready for him.
Not yet, no.
Is it any wonder that he sets his sights on Detroit?
Oh, Detroit at that time, it was like a magnet for anyone with a dream and the willingness to work hard. Imagine walking the streets of Detroit with Henry Ford in, let's say, 1900. The air, it's thick with smoke. The streets are packed with workers, entrepreneurs, you name it. There's this rumble of machinery that just echoes through the city. It's a place on the verge of a total transformation, and it's all driven by the promise of new technologies.
And smack dab in the middle of it all is young Henry Ford.
Ready to make his mark.
And make his mark, he did. But it wasn't exactly a straight shot to the top, was it?
Oh, not even close. I mean, Ford's early career, it's full of these twists and turns.
Like he was almost going through his own personal crash course.
Exactly. Like he was being prepared, for
Yeah.
all the challenges that were coming his way.
So let's talk about those challenges. You mentioned new technologies, and in preparing for this deep dive, you unearthed some really interesting stuff about Ford's early work with electric engines.
Oh, yeah. At the Edison Illuminating Company, which, by the way, was one of the very first electric companies in the world.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. And this is where Ford gets his hands dirty with some pretty cutting-edge stuff for the time. Electric motors. Now, we're not talking about the sleek, efficient electric engines you see today.
No.
These were these big, clunky things. Not always reliable, but for Ford, they represented the future of mechanical power.
He's in the thick of it, learning about electricity, these new powerful engines. You can almost feel the wheels turning in his head.
And then, as fate would have it, he stumbles upon something that would change everything: the gasoline engine.
The gasoline engine. Talk about a game changer. Here you have Ford, this young mechanic, already knee-deep in the world of engines and electricity, and bam! He bumps into this totally new concept, the gasoline engine.
It was like a bolt from the blue, really. This raw, untamed power. It just captured his imagination. And I think his experience with electric motors, it actually gave him a unique perspective.
So he saw something that others didn't.
Exactly. Where others saw limitations, Ford, he saw potential, you see. He was already thinking about how to improve it, how to make it better.
He was always tinkering, wasn't he?
Always. And this is where that relentless drive of his, that need to refine and improve,
Yeah.
it really kicks into overdrive.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing from there, was it?
Oh, not at all. I mean, not even close. In fact, Ford's first 2 attempts at starting a car company, they were complete failures. And I'm not talking about minor setbacks here. We're talking doors shuttered, lights out, total flops.
Wow. 2 strikes. I mean, you'd think that'd be enough to make someone want to give up and just, go back to the farm.
Right. You'd think so. But not Henry Ford. He was never one to back down from a challenge.
He just kept bouncing back.
He did. And those failures, as tough as they were absolutely crucial to his later success, I'd say.
How so?
They were learning experiences, you see.
Yeah.
Harsh, but effective. Each failure, it taught him something new about design, about production, about, the importance of financing. He learned the hard way, but he learned.
So he's picking himself up, dusting himself off, and then, and this is where things take a turn I definitely didn't see coming, he becomes a race car driver.
And not just any race car driver. He was actually quite good at it.
Wait, really? I never knew that about him.
Oh, yeah. But his foray into racing, it wasn't just about the thrill of speed,
There was a method to the madness.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This was a calculated business move, pure and simple. You see, back then, car racing, it wasn't just a sport, it was a spectacle.
I bet.
It was a public proving ground for this brand new technology. And Ford, he knew that if he could prove himself on the racetrack, if he could show the world that his cars were fast, that they were reliable, well, that would translate into success off the track as well.
So he's out there winning races, turning heads, and drumming up publicity all at the same time.
Exactly. He was marketing genius, really. Generating buzz, building brand recognition. It was a way to attract investors, show them that he was the real deal.
And all of this buildup leads to 1903, to the official launch of the Ford Motor Company.
And what's really striking about Ford Motor Company right from the get-go is Ford's vision, his big, audacious goal.
Which was?
To build a car for everyone,
Mm.
not just the wealthy, but a car that everyday people could afford.
That was unheard of back then, wasn't it?
It was radical. And that car, of course, was the Model T.
The car that would change the world. But, all right, how do you even begin to build a car that's affordable for the average person? I mean, where do you even start?
That's where Ford's obsession with efficiency, it comes full circle. He knew that in order to make the Model T affordable, he needed to find a way to produce it on a scale never seen before.
Enter the assembly line.
Precise.
And that's something most people, even today, they associate with Henry Ford. But the story behind how he got that idea, well, let's just say it's not what you'd expect. He got the idea from a slaughterhouse. A slaughterhouse. Can you imagine? Who thinks of that and goes, yep, that's how we're going to build cars? Only Henry Ford.
I know, right? But that was Ford, always observing, always looking for a better way to do things. And, the slaughterhouse, it was all about efficiency, moving those carcasses along the line, each worker with a specific task.
And Ford sees that, and the light bulb goes off.
Exactly. It was a system designed for speed, for maximum output, and that's exactly what Ford was after.
The assembly line is such a simple idea in a way, but it really did revolutionize, well, everything. Not just cars, but the way we make things, period.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a testament to Ford's genius, this ability to look at something completely unrelated, something like a slaughterhouse, and see its potential to transform an entire industry.
So the assembly line, it completely changes the game for car production, right? I mean, talk about impact.
Oh, it was a seismic shift.
Yeah.
I mean, by breaking down the process, making it all these smaller, specialized tasks, Ford was able to ramp up production speed like, well, nobody had ever seen.
More cars, faster, and for less money.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And a lower cost per car meant he could finally make those cars affordable, just like he'd always dreamed. It's remarkable, really, how his vision for accessible cars led to this total revolution in manufacturing.
But let's be real. Even the best ideas, they often come with a downside. We can't talk about the assembly line without acknowledging the impact it had on the workers.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword of progress, isn't it? The human cost.
Because while Ford might have created jobs, those jobs on the assembly line, they weren't always, well, let's just say they weren't always the most stimulating.
That's putting it mildly. I mean, the repetitive nature of the work, monotony, it took its toll on people. Boredom, injuries, you name it.
It's that classic dilemma, innovation versus, well, the human element.
Exactly. And in Ford's case, you do have to wonder if his drive for efficiency, for streamlining production, if maybe he lost sight of the people actually doing the work.
It makes you think. Ford, he's such a complicated figure, a mass of contradictions, a visionary, no doubt. I mean, the man changed the world.
There's no denying that.
But he was also flawed, stubborn.
As brilliant as he was, he could be blind to the consequences of his own actions.
It's fascinating, really. You know, with all this talk about the Model T, the assembly line, mass production, it makes you wonder what Ford would think of cars today.
Oh, I know, right.
The technology, the computers.
Self-driving cars?
Yeah.
Imagine showing him a Tesla.
Would his head explode? Would he try to take it apart right then and there?
Knowing Ford, I think he'd see it as the ultimate challenge. A brand new puzzle to figure out.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up. That was a deep dive if I've ever seen one. Big thanks to you for knowing so much about Henry Ford. Who knew the man was such a fascinating character?
My pleasure, truly.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, well, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Keep those engines running, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.